1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone! My goodness, this is Jewish Talk. It's Sunday. Gewalt. I come to you live from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC. We are also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes app. We can be seen in the studios right here at WHPC's Facebook Live page. I'm wavy now. Wavy to all those listening and all those who are watching. Thank you so much for joining us. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there. If you don't know who's talking, well, here I am. It's Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. You know why I say that? Because we're heard all day and we can hear this program again at 11 p.m. So depending on when you're watching or listening, you're always welcome. Thank you. So guess what? We all know there's just so many shopping days left now to Passover. And one of the things that really fascinated me this year in preparation for Passover is the central theme of Passover is to talk. We talk and we talk. We sit down at the Seder and we're talking and we're talking and we're talking. So much talking. I can't believe how much talking. And for a rabbi, it's very easy because rabbis talk from both sides of their mouth. So Passover is all about talking. The Talmud tells us that the matzah has actually got a name called Lechem Oni, which translates the bread of answering, since it is the bread upon which we declare many things. There's actually a specific mitzvah to tell the story, to recount the story of Exodus. We are encouraged not to be succinct, but rather to talk and to talk and to talk. It's praiseworthy, read in the Haggadah, it's praiseworthy to dwell on the story and to tell it as fully as possible. But in Hebrew it sounds better. So the more you talk, the more praiseworthy you are. So how do we balance this with another teaching that says, say little and do much? And the other one that says, a person who's verbose and loquacious brings mistakes. So why on Passover do we have this entirely different attitude towards speech? As we all prepare ourselves for the 2 nights of Passover, the 2 Seders, S-E-D-E-R, and both evenings, that's Friday evening and Saturday evening, the first 2 days of the holiday, we sit down to a Seder and we talk and the children ask the questions and we talk and then we eat and then we talk and then we talk and then we eat and then we eat and we talk. So what is this? Why do we have this change of attitude? Well, first I want to quote from Viktor Frankl in his book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he describes what happened after the Holocaust to those who were liberated. And he says the following: the body has fewer inhibitions than the mind. It made good use of the new freedom from the first moment on. So it began to eat ravenously for hours and days, even half the night. It is amazing what quantities one can eat. And when one of the prisoners was invited out by a friendly farmer in the neighborhood, he ate, and then he drank coffee, which loosened his tongue, and he began to talk, often for hours. The pressure which had been on his mind for years was released at last. Hearing him talk, one got the impression that he had to talk, that his desire to speak was irresistible. And Viktor Frankl continues, I've known people who have been under heavy pressure only for a short time to have similar reactions. Many days passed until not only the tongue was loosed, but something within oneself as well. Then feeling suddenly broke through the strange fetters, which of course has restrained it. I also quote from Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik, who writes that upon delivery from the Egyptian bondage, the Israelites regained their self-expression. As long as they were subjected to the Egyptian bondage, their self-expression was stifled and suppressed. But at the moment of Exodus, the Israelites regained their speech. Slaves cannot express or assert themselves properly. They cannot realize their potential. Only a free person is capable of doing this. The Arizal, the famous Kabbalistic leader, saw a connection between speech and freedom in the very name of the holiday. In Hebrew it's called Pesach, which comes from the word peh, sach. Peh is a Hebrew word for mouth, and sach, whose sach vayehu means converses. So Pesach is the mouth that speaks. And part of affirming our freedom on Passover is to affirm the awesome responsibility that comes with the freedom of speech. Part of what makes America this exceptional country and a true democracy in that its First Amendment promises of free speech. Free speech means we can protest, advocate, object, speak our minds. However, even free speech has its restrictions. One may not use their words to incite or to libel someone else. One may not freely share obscenities or plagiarize someone else's words. You see, Judaism also believes in freedom of speech and indeed sees the capacity to speak as one of the greatest expressions of freedom. American law tolerates speech, which is negative, insensitive, and tactless. Just to remind everyone, when Justice Louis Brandeis affirmed the freedom of speech in the Supreme Court decision of 1927, he acknowledged that such liberty made possible the dissemination of noxious doctrines. Torah has no tolerance for noxious doctrines. Not only are we prohibited from speaking gossip, whether true or untrue, we are enjoined to be mindful of our choice of words. In contrast to noxious, we measure the acceptability of speech by whatever, whenever, but it should never be lashon hara. It should always be lashon nakiya, which translates speech that is clean, proper, concise, elevating. Lashon hara, evil talk, is prohibited as it hurts others, and profanity is forbidden because it degrades and hurts oneself. Passover and Tisha B'Av are always on the same day of the week and share a close association. It has been suggested that on Passover we are acutely aware of the loss of the temple and remember how the evening is not entirely complete without the paschal offerings that was brought in the temple. That is why we eat an egg, the symbol of mourning, and remember how Hillel used to eat his sandwich when the temple stood. However, others see, they don't want to see the connection between Passover and Tisha B'Av in a negative sense. They also see this as part of a regal aspect of the Seder night. What then is the connection between Passover, Pesach, and Tisha B'Av? So the great rabbis explain that really in a deeper sense, Pesach makes up for the problem, rectifies the problem that we faced on Tisha B'Av. What do we say in the Haggadah? Kol dichvin yeseh v'yechol. Whoever is hungry, come and eat. It's a way of expressing our love for everyone. Kol, anybody, kol dichvin. Anybody is invited to join us for our Seder. Those to the right of me, those to the left of me, those who are more religious, those who are less religious, those that agree with me, and those who couldn't disagree with me more, those who like my candidate, and those who support another one. So what happens? On Seder night, everyone is invited to break matzah with each of us. My friends are invited, the strangers are invited, and even my so-called people, are also invited. Everybody. So Passover seeks to fix the damage of Tisha B'Av. What was the reason for the destruction of the sad day of Tisha B'Av? Bad words. Destruction resulted from abuse of the power of speech. People said bad things about each other. There was a lack of respect for each other. The Passover celebration, this redemption, occurs when I'm using my speech to build bridges, to create connections, and to repair the world around us. That is the connection between Passover, the use of the egg, to repair the mistake of the negative speech that was said on Tisha B'Av, now elevated and transformed into positive speech at the Seder night. So on the night of the Passover, Seder night, the night of Pesach, of talking mouths, we renew that promise to use the speech that comes with our newfound freedom to be a kind one, to be a sharing one, to be a thoughtful speech, to be a considerate one in what we say and how we say it. The Torah doesn't seek to stifle opinions and suppress perspectives. The Pesach celebration of freedom of speech is a celebration of our ability to think differently, to speak different, and to write our different opinions freely. What it doesn't allow us to do is to ignore the impact of what we write and say on others and how they feel, how our message and messaging triggers hurt or pain in others. On Passover, we are not only concerned with what goes into our mouth, but we sit the night and speak appropriately, because we are ever aware of what comes out of it as well. So that's just an insight, a broader perspective on the freedom of speech on the night of Passover. And the more we prepare ourselves for that, in terms of looking at the Haggadah, reading up in advance, looking up the commentaries, getting a general feeling of what the evening is all about, the more meaningful and more uplifting the Seder becomes. And with that in mind, I'd like to share the following so that all of us can imagine and be in the position to be able to say that as we sit down to our Seder too should be an exhilarating one. If you are actually leading the Seder or together with someone else, talk it through in advance and make a resolution that the kind of conversation, the kind of commentary, the kind of atmosphere should leave everybody elevated. And one of the ways, I would say, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, of if you're the leader of a Seder, that you were successful, is that people want to stay until the end. No one's rushing out. No one's looking at their clock because you've made it so inspiring. So I'm going to share with you now something that you may wish to include in your perspective, in your outlook, in preparing and conducting the Seder this coming Friday evening and Saturday night. The first 2 days of the 8 days of Passover. Before I do that, I also want to share with you that this Monday night and Tuesday, the Jewish community around the world will be marking and celebrating a very unique birthday, a birthday anniversary. For this coming Tuesday, on the Hebrew calendar, is the 11th day of Nisan, Yud Aleph Nisan. This day is the anniversary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's birthday, and this Tuesday will mark 120th birthday. So I'd like to share with you what comes to my mind when I read about the 120th birthday and seek to celebrate it and elevate it and to be inspired by the Rebbe on this coming Tuesday. It takes me back to a scene in the Haggadah of the Passover Haggadah, which also includes the Maxwell House. I hope everybody has graduated from the Maxwell House one already, because enough already. Someone told me that the reason why Maxwell House is so well known because they were trying to substitute the 4 cups of wine with 4 cups of coffee. It ain't happening, baby. We're still using wine, or grape juice, of course, is also good, but 4 cups of coffee doesn't quite make it. So here's the story. We begin the Haggadah with a story, and it's an amazing piece of the Haggadah itself. The Haggadah is telling us, as I said, it's an important night to speak, and the more we speak about the Exodus and the many miracles, etc., we be that much more praiseworthy. Harei ze meshubach. Now, in order to bring a proof text, a historical background to show that even if you know it all, you're a wise person, you're an understanding person, you're a knowledgeable person, you've been doing this for many years, every single person nevertheless has the obligation and the responsibility to sit on the night of the Seder and recount the story of the Haggadah. So, as part of that, the Haggadah goes on to tells us a story that happened in Bnei Barak. It happened that the Rabbi Eliezer was sitting there, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and they're all sitting in the Seder in Bnei Barak. What were they doing there? They were discussing the Exodus from Egypt the entire night. They were so engrossed in what they were doing, their students came and tell teachers, it's time to say the Shema, it's morning. So this is, on the surface, sharing us in the Haggadah how important it is, whoever we may be. In this case, this group of rabbis, one was a Cohen, one was a Levi, one was a Yisrael. The idea that they were very learned, nevertheless, they saw it important to sit and study and talk about it all night. Fine, good. Now on the surface, it's basically telling us how important it is that whoever we may be, we must fulfill the obligation and to elaborate on the story of the departure from Egypt. And the more we talk, the more praise we become. But let's look at the story itself. And there are a number of troubling aspects to this story. First of all, we know from various sources that 3 of the 4 sages that I just mentioned, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Tarfon, they were actually teachers of Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Akiva was from Bnei Barak, and he was conducting this Seder in Bnei Barak. While the other rabbis, one was from Lud, one was from Pekin. That doesn't make sense. Here, Rabbi Akiva is a student of these rabbis. And they were spending the Seder night with their student, Rabbi Akiva? Come on. We all know it's the exact opposite of normal protocol. What's normal protocol? The students go to visit their teachers on the festivals and not the other way around. So what's going on over here? Why would all these rabbis come to Rabbi Akiva, who was their student? Protocol calls that you're the student, you go to your teacher. So why do they all come to him while he was doing his Seder in Bnei Barak? So I share with you an amazing insight from one of the renowned Lithuanian rabbis of the 19th and early 20th century. He's known as the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein. And he explains like this. He suggests a fabulous insight that I'm living with and I want to share with you. Let's put it into a historical perspective. This Seder that's taking place in Bnei Barak took place after the destruction of the Second Temple. This was one of the most horrific times in Jewish history. Very tragic, terrible, despairing era in our history. The Bar Kokhba rebellion had been put down because they had tried to recapture the sovereignty over Judea. The leaders of the community, the Jewish leaders, were being tortured to death, and only a long, bitter exile was looming in the horizon. And then suddenly, during this period of time, along comes the 15th day of the month. So the question is, how could we sit back and celebrate Passover Seder in the midst of this terrible persecutions and terror? How can the sages inspire themselves so they should inspire their followers and their flock? Along comes this sage and tells us that's exactly why these rabbis, albeit teachers, went to their student Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Barak. Because when they went to Bnei Barak and sat with Rabbi Akiva, they saw the world totally different. Let me explain why. During this period of frustrated hopes and smashed expectations, there was no greater personification of faith among the Jewish people at that time than Rabbi Akiva. Because everything about him suggested his way of life, his outlook. He brought to the table a spirit of incomparable faith, of hope, of resilience and optimism. Despite the fact that he himself had suffered so much, he was behind the Bar Kokhba on a spiritual sense, and all of this felt nothing. It was an absolute disaster. Nevertheless, he never surrendered to cynicism or despair. Let me share with you a couple of episodes in his life to bring this to the forefront. In an amazing incident recorded in the Talmud, several rabbis, including those I've just mentioned, were walking near the desolate Temple Mount after the destruction of the Second Temple, and they suddenly saw a fox emerging from the place of the holies of holies. So all these rabbis started to cry. Well, Rabbi Akiva, he started to laugh. They said, "What are you talking about? How can you laugh?" And he turned to them, "Why are you crying?" He said, "What are you talking about? We see a fox, an animal coming out of a very holy place of the holies of holies." He says, that's the reason why I'm laughing. He says, if this part was foretold and has been fulfilled, how much more so can we look forward to the ultimate prophecies of the arrival of Mashiach, when things will go back and even better than before. And they said to him, "You have comforted us." Bottom line is, Rabbi Akiva was living in the same world as them, but he had the keen ability to perceive Exodus, to perceive the whole exile as the genesis of redemption, from brokenness to a springboard for a deeper wholesomeness, as pain as a harbinger of transformation. So Rabbi Akiva's soul was on fire, so to speak, with a Geula consciousness. His very being saturated with a redemptive and Mashiach worldview. His total faith in the future destiny of the entire world was refined, and he was able to look even at the exile with all of its problems, and he saw them as birth pangs of bigger and greater things. We all know the other story. Again, it brings out Rabbi Akiva. And that's why my thought today, dear friends, is be this personality. When your friends and family sit at your Seder table, bring them into this journey, in Rabbi Akiva's journey of how to look at the world, especially in the world that we live in today. Here's another example of Rabbi Akiva's life. He was walking along a road and he came upon a certain city. And he wanted to stay in Motel 6, but they wouldn't give him any space. He said, his reaction was, everything that God does, he does for the best. What did he do? He went and he slept in the field. He had with him a rooster, a donkey, and a candle. What happened? A gust of wind came and extinguished the candle. A cat came and ate the rooster. And a lion came and ate the donkey. What did he say? Everything that God does is for the best. That night, an army came and took the city into captivity. Turned out that Rabbi Akiva alone, who was not in the city and had no light, no lit candle, no noisy rooster, or a donkey to give away his location, was saved. And he said to his students, "Didn't I tell you? Everything that God does, he does for the best." Can you see that, my friends? This is Rabbi Akiva. You'd think it was the end of the world for him. No. He saw a fox coming out. That wasn't the end of the world for him either. Think about Rabbi Akiva. He lost 24,000 of his students. And you would think that he would give up. He would say, listen, forget about it. What did he do? He traveled south after this terrible time. He found 5 students and he rebuilt Judaism and Torah through them. He was 40 years old, knew nothing. He was a complete ignorant person, ignoramus of all the Torah learning. But he didn't give up. He didn't say, well, I'm 40 years old, there's no hope for me. He went and he learned and he became one of the greatest Jewish leaders, mentioned in the Talmud nearly every other page. And then let's look at his final moments. His final moments. As you know, during that time, there were 10 martyrs, 10 Jewish leaders who were taken by the Romans. In this case, Rabbi Akiva, his own death was steeped in suffering. What were they doing? They were, all those leaders were sentenced to death for refusing to obey the laws of that time, which forbade people from studying Torah. So what did they do to Rabbi Akiva? He was taken out for execution. It was the hour of saying the Shema. And while they combed his flesh with iron combs, he was saying the Shema. He was accepting upon himself the kingship of heaven. So the disciple said to him, Master, even unto this point, dying, his body tortured. He explained that until then he had never had the opportunity to fulfill the words, I love Hashem with all my soul. Now I have this opportunity. You can imagine. See, the Shema is our testimony in our belief in the ultimate redemption and the time when the world will all be one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Ultimately, the whole world will recognize Hashem. This is what was on his mind. So Where else could the sages go to experience viscerally the energy of redemption, if not at the ambience of Rabbi Akiva's Seder in Bnei Barak? Everyone found it difficult to be in the appropriate frame of mind to celebrate Seder properly. It was going on, it was a disaster. But they came to Bnei Barak. They went to their student, because in the presence of Rabbi Akiva, there was always the halo of Geula, a light of hope, a light of redemption, a light of clarity, a light of faith. Not because he was naive. No. Because Rabbi Akiva saw deeper than everybody else. For him, every opportunity was seen as an opportunity. Every crisis was an opportunity. The beginning and a new consciousness for emerging positivity. In our generation, also a generation that has seen so much destruction and upheavals, the Lubavitcher Rebbe embodied that kind of vision and life of Rabbi Akiva. And once you tasted his Seder, so to speak, you can't go anywhere else. You can never forget the message of empowerment and deep faith. And I want to share with you that the secret of Yachatz and Tzafon, during the Seder we have so many stages, 15 stages, and at a certain point, we take the middle matzah and we break it into pieces. Break it into two at least. And we put away the bigger broken piece and we hide it, right? The famous afikoman that eventually gets either captured by the children or held by the children or protected by the children. And of course, depending on your custom, what happens to get it back? So it's hidden. Because our broken pieces, the deeper reason why we do take the matzah and go through this process and hide it, because our broken pieces are really hidden treasures. And then later at the Seder, we arrive at Tzafon. That's the point right after before we we conclude the meal. The word Tzafon means hidden reality. Our Yachatz, the piece of matzah which was broken before, suddenly allows us to our Tzafon, to our hidden treasures, to our deepest purity, our holiness, our joy, to our infinite divine selves. Only then can we finish the Seder and declare L'shon haba b'Yerushalayim. This, my friends, is the Rebbe. It's what he gave the world in a post-Holocaust generation. Like Rabbi Akiva in his day, he searched and helped us search and find the opportunity in each crisis, the healing in each calamity, the treasure in each malady, and the light hidden in the darkness, and the wholesome embedded in the broken places of our hearts. If you encounter exile, the Rebbe taught, it's an invitation, a deep, painful, and vulnerable invitation to discover redemption and the depth of it in so many different ways. So, Rabbi Akiva that we're talking about today lived for 120 years. This coming Tuesday, as we mark the anniversary of the Rebbe's 120th birthday, he was born in 1902, we too can empower ourselves with this perspective of looking at things like Rabbi Akiva, and certainly how the Rebbe taught us to follow in Rabbi Akiva's ways, to have such a vision, not to be dimmed in the slightest fashion, but to be able to make a difference in this world. It took Noah 120 years to build the ark, and of course he saved humanity. So on the Rebbe's 120th birthday, we too must complete the Rebbe's ark. As the Baal Shem Tov tells us, what's the ark? Is the words of Torah and prayer and holiness that all of us can do to help bring the Mashiach. Wishing everybody Chag Kosher V'Sameach. Thank you all for joining us. Be well and have a wonderful holiday.